Good evening, everyone. Give me just a moment and I'll get our introduction slides pulled up here this evening. Welcome to the April 12th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our website within 1 week's time. If you have any logistics issues, we do recommend that you reach out to Zoom for support. This evening's agenda has 2 time allotments for public comment, and as a reminder, only the committee chair may recognize a public attendee. Our chair, Elizabeth Teagan, is out this evening, so Vice Chair Sandra Smith is going to be sitting in on that role this evening. You can use the raise the hand feature to indicate your desire to participate during those 2 specific agenda times. And with that, I will hand it over to Sandra and we'll get started.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sandra Smith. I'm your vice chairman, filling in for Chairman Elizabeth, who is out today for April's Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. I think the first thing on the agenda would be to take the roll call. Correct? I'll have Erin do that.
Yep. Just making sure I was still unmuted. Okay, we know that Elizabeth Teagan is absent this evening. Sandra Smith.
Here.
Brian St. John.
Here.
Rusty Davis.
Here.
Christy Dykink.
Here.
Leslie Albert.
Present.
Jennifer Hammelman.
Here.
Rich McConaughey is absent. Vinod Singh.
Here. Good evening.
And Ashwin Naharaja is also absent this evening. And with that, that completes the roll call there, Sandra.
You're muted, Sandra.
Of course. Okay. All right. The first thing on the agenda today is the Garbage and Recycling Communications and Solid Waste Recycling Program updates that Rusty will be doing. So go ahead, Rusty.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Thursday evening. Just wanted to go over a few updates from our staff at Solid Waste and Recycling. So I'll just jump right in. Number one, with the administrative rules, after our March meeting, we cleaned those up and took them to the board this last week to the board's working session. And so we didn't run into any issues at the working session. So our next thing is to proceed to the regular Board of County Commissioners meeting on April 21st for approval. We don't foresee any hiccups or any issues with that. So we're anticipating full approval. The next thing is just to give you an update on where we're at staff-wise as far as our recruiting efforts. Kate has been busy with the program coordinator for contamination reduction, doing that recruitment. They've moved through the first round of interviews, and then they had their second round today. So we should hopefully have an offer on the table fairly shortly, and we'll be able to move forward with that. As far as the ops supervisor position that's open, that recruitment, we got underway with first round interviews this week, finished those up today, and we'll be looking to move into the second round sometime next week. Another thing of note is that the spring mailer's gone out. Kate's team's been working on that. And we're starting, with the spring, we're starting to really work on our multifamily outreach as part of our contamination reduction effort through RMA. So we're starting to gear up towards that in spite of not having the program coordinator in place, but as soon as that person comes on board, it'll just make it a little easier. And yeah, that's where our focus is going to be over the next little while. Are there any questions at this time? Okay,
Thank you, Rusty.
you're welcome.
All right. Next on the agenda is committee news and calendar updates, and we'll have Erin give us the updates.
Sure, I'm happy to walk through the upcoming calendar updates. On April 29th, I sent out the communication for the Staff Volunteer Appreciation event. This event is going to be held at the PCC Willow Creek Opportunity Center. That is in Hillsboro. Looks like there's free parking on site. We do ask that you take the time to RSVP if you can attend. We've already heard from a few of you. That's great. Certainly RSVP through the link in the invite, but let me know as well because I don't have visibility as to the master guest list. And we certainly look forward to seeing you all there if your schedule permits. Next item up on the calendar is going to be May 21st. That meeting is when I will come back and do the annual rate review findings. We will need a quorum for that meeting. And I also have plans to come back and do an update for Hillsboro Garbage Disposal Certificate review at that time. As for June, we're going to have our education and outreach team come and speak to you all about our annual reporting to Metro and for the state's opportunity to recycle. And I'm also working on a presentation around the franchise renewal that Recology has coming up. I'm coming up with some roles and responsibilities. This is the first time I'm managing that process. So I'm working on a timeline and then just want it to be really clear what the expectations are for this committee as well. For July, I know that Sarah Coates on my team sent out a poll for a tour in late July. We're still, I don't know if we've heard from everyone. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go and weigh in, please do so sooner than later. I know that there's already some individuals that can't go that week. So we might want to look at some alternate times and maybe early August instead, but really would need you all's feedback to see what's going to work best. Then for August, we will be coming back to you. I'll be coming back to you with that Recology franchise agreement renewal. We'll be seeking this committee's approval through a quorum to move that over to the board for finalization. And I'm going to tap our code enforcement team to come in and do an overview. Certainly lots going on with code enforcement activities and unincorporated. So it'll be good to have Joe come give you an update. And then for September, I'm looking at doing a Washington County recycling system overview with the support of the education and outreach team, just talking about drop-off options, our curbside collection, our alternate programs like Recycle Plus. And either in September or October, I have been a part of the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization has a couple working subgroups related to solid waste. One is disaster debris related, and the other one is related to systems resilience. And we'd be doing lots of good work under the direction of Jim Quinn at Metro. I've reached out to him to see if he would come do a presentation and update for you all just to know some of those more regional projects that we're working on that really build towards system resilience. And then also we can talk a little bit about the county's responsibility in a major disaster when disaster debris is involved. And I'm slating that either for September or October, kind of to align with Disaster Preparedness Month. And pretty much that wraps up most of the finalized activities on the calendar. I'll turn it back over to you, Sandra.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. I want to bring up a couple things. First, the volunteer appreciation event. That is a fun event, and you guys should all go to it. I've gone to it for several years. They have food, they have prizes. You get to see the board of commissioners, there's sheriffs are there, all sorts of people that you can hang out with and meet and see in person. The Washington County really goes all out, and it's you guys work hard and you deserve volunteers deserve this. So if you can make it, definitely go. It's really fun when we get our own table and we can hang out and have fun, and I know several of you have gone before. So hopefully you'll go this year too. I'll probably send out a reminder, remind you guys to RSVP. It's a great event. Also, I have found out there's another event this Saturday, the 11th. I think it's Saturday. There is a shred day and electronic e-waste recycling day. It will be 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the agency at Lifetime Work Parking Lot. The Lifetime, what do you call it? Athletic Center over on 116th Avenue and off of Barnes, I think. I can't remember. But that's going on. I don't know of any other. Do you guys? Anyone else have any upcoming recycling or events or news? Go ahead, Bernard.
It's not really news. I went and visited or toured the James Recycling Center in Beaverton. And if we ever want, maybe tie that into the tour day, they'd be happy to have us stop by. But they and just kind of see what they're doing there. They like to do it before they open though, so it would be like 10 o'clock, 9:30, something like that is when we went. It's not a very big space, but just kind of, they're more focusing on that drop off there. So if we want to do that, Kathy offered it up. So
I'd like to meet James too.
Yep.
I read about him. He's a really cool guy. It'd be fun to meet him and see what he's doing there. And
so just putting that out there for later. It's probably out of sequitur here, but just for putting it out there.
Cool. Anyone else have any events coming up? I haven't heard anything from Sunset High School yet, but they might have a styrofoam event in late April or May. I will let you guys know if that comes up. Okay, if not, next thing is public communication. I don't think we have anybody in the attendee poll today.
I guess these topics weren't riveting enough to draw in the community, so
And
yes, we
usually
can
the
pass on
haulers
that.
are there. No hauler representative or anything today.
We're all busy with rate review.
Okay, so I guess we'll go right into our presentations for this evening. The first one is Oregon public officials need to know facts about public meetings, public records, and ethics laws. And our presenter tonight is Eamon McMahon. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Eamon.
Hi, Eamon. Just a point of order. Do you prefer to drive your own slideshow, or would you like me to do that for you this evening?
If you could, that would be great.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so good afternoon, or I guess good evening, everyone. So like Sandra and Aaron said, my name is Eamon McMahon, and I'm an attorney with the Washington County Counsel's Office. And so what I'm going to do here tonight is I'm going to sort of walk you through a training about the kind of nuts and bolts of Oregon public meetings, public records, and ethics law. Now, a couple of things. As anytime you talk to a lawyer, you get to hear all of the disclaimers and caveats and all that kind of stuff at the top. So I'm an attorney for Washington County. I am not an attorney for you. This is not meant to be legal advice. If you have any questions about the training, I'll do the best I can to answer them or point you in the right direction. But I represent the county and not you in an individual capacity. So what I'm going to do tonight, though, is sort of walk you through the rules that apply to your participation and role as a member of the GRAC. Kind of what that means in terms of the public meetings, public records, and ethics law. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Sorry, I have too many things open. Give me 2 seconds and then I'll be able to advance.
No worries.
Okay, is that advancing for you all?
Yep.
Great.
Okay, so that's kind of the introduction. There are the three portions of tonight's presentation. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so Oregon's public meetings law. And this is sort of an introductory statement that guides the interpretation and application of this law. The Oregon form of government requires an informed public aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which such meetings were made. It is the intent of the public meetings law that decisions of governing bodies be arrived at openly. And then it gives you the place in the law where that is. So really, this is sort of our North Star for following public meetings law and public records law. The notion is that since we are a government entity, that information needs to be done in the open and publicly. So the members of the public can comment and see how their government is working and what sort of information their government is considering, and what goes into the decisions that affect all the members of the public. So that is sort of the guiding ethos of the public meetings law. So we'll go into next what that means in terms of the operations of this CRAC. We can go to the next slide, please. So who is required to hold public meetings? The statute lists out a couple entities, and those are the governing body of any state, regional government, county government, city, special district, municipal corporation, or any agency of those entities, including boards, commissions, subcommittees, and most relevantly for you all, advisory groups. So because you are an advisory group for Washington County, we fall under the aegis of the Oregon Public Meetings Law. You can go to the next slide. And there are a couple of definitions that apply. Once we've identified that we are an entity that is required to hold public meetings, there are several definitions that apply. Those meetings shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting, except as otherwise provided. And there are a couple of specific carve-outs for that, but none of which are particularly relevant here. But the next thing is, and this is again one of those things that people kind of roll their eyes about lawyer, but we got to be really specific when we're defining terms, when what the definition of is and that sort of a thing. So here we want to talk about what constitutes a meeting. So a meeting is a convening of the governing body of a public body for which a quorum is required in order to make a decision or deliberate toward a decision on any matter. It does not include any on-site inspection of a project or program. It doesn't include the attendance of members of a governing body in any national, regional, or state association to which the public body or members belong. So I think an example that kind of popped up earlier. So Vinod, I believe you mentioned that you had gone to an on-site inspection and had taken a tour of a recycling facility. If that's something you had done as a collective entity, that would not constitute a meeting. So there are a couple of specific carve-outs for it. But generally speaking, this definition is broadly construed. There was a bill in 2023, House Bill 2805, that further defined what a meeting means. And that means that it is gathering in a physical location or using electronic, video, or telephonic technology to be able to communicate contemporaneously among participants, which is exactly what's happening here. That's things like Zoom meetings. The third is using serial electric written communication among participants. Now that means replying all to an email chain. So if you were to have an email chain with all the members of the GRAC, and you were to be replying all so that every member of the GRAC could see what was happening, that would technically constitute a meeting under the Oregon statute. Finally, and this is again sort of another example of why this is construed broadly, a meeting constitutes using an intermediary to communicate among participants. That's if you had a messenger that you were sending back and forth with written notes or verbal communications. And this is one of those things where you can kind of see where there are some loopholes that the law was designed to close. And again, all of these definitions are focused on making sure that meetings are open and available to the public so that there are not secret deliberations occurring, and so the work of government is done openly and publicly. And I will let you know that I'm giving this presentation now. I will probably need to give you an updated presentation in a couple of months because there were some new public records laws that were passed that go into effect in June of this year that will again sort of shape this definition and what constitutes the public meetings law that you will need to follow because of some ongoing concerns about maybe being too over-inclusive or not inclusive enough in terms of what constitutes a meeting. Okay, so we're ready to go to the next one. Okay, so we have established that you're a public body and that we are having a meeting. So what does that mean? What has to happen at those meetings? Well, one of the things is that there must be meeting minutes. A body must either take a sound, video, or digital recording of the public meeting, like we're doing now when that little notification popped up that these meetings are being recorded, or keep written minutes of its meetings and executive session. And those minutes must include the members present, motions, proposals, resolutions, ordinances, and measures and their disposition, that is if they were approved or rejected, the results of all votes and who voted which way, except if the board has over 25 members, the substance of any discussion on any matter that provides a true reflection of the matters discussed in the view of board members, and a reference to all documents received or discussed, unless they're exempt in the public records law. And again, that's to make sure that there is a record of what happened at that meeting so that a member of the public can come in, go in, and inspect and see what happened, see what information was considered and what decision the government arrived at. So we're good to go to the next slide. So we've got a couple of examples of things that may or may not constitute a public meeting. So one example is a telephonic discussion between two council members. Does anyone think that that might constitute a public meeting? If you just want to raise your hand or not, I'm seeing some head nods. No. So it's kind of a trick question. And the answer is, it depends, which again is one of a lawyer's favorite phrases. So a telephone discussion between two council members. What if the council is only 3 people? Because at that point, 2 members would be sufficient to constitute a quorum. And if they were discussing something that was being deliberated on or making a decision, the presence of those 2 members, because they constitute a quorum, would be sufficient to make that telephone discussion a public meeting. So again, sort of this goes back to that very first definition, talking about a public meeting. And again, it's broadly construed. The notion is that we want to make sure that all public meetings and all deliberations are public.
Eamon, can I ask you a question?
Sure, go for it.
So if we had say a subcommittee of this advisory committee and that only had 3 members, that would be an instance where it would be a public meeting, correct?
Yes, it would.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Again, we're always erring on the side of treating something as a public meeting. I think that's kind of again, talk about kind of the guiding lights. That's one of those things. If in doubt, assume it's a public meeting.
Great.
I know we already talked about this one, but again, an email conversation in which all council members are copied, that again gets back to a sequential electronic communication. If matters that the board is deliberating on are being discussed, that's a public meeting. If you're trying to figure out where you're going to go meet for lunch after your meeting, or if you want to go, set up a tour or something like that, that is not going to be considered a public meeting. But if it's something that the GRAC is considering or deliberating, that will be considered a public meeting if those email exchanges are, if they include a quorum of members and if they are discussing the matter at hand. The next one, I think it kind of gives it away in the question, but that's a discussion between a quorum of council members at a holiday party. Again, this is an it depends sort of an answer. So if they're talking about how their kids are doing or what they're doing for that holiday, that's not a public meeting. If they're talking about something that they have to deliberate on, then that discussion at a holiday party would constitute a public meeting. So again, just be very cautious and conscientious of, is there a quorum and are you having discussions about the matters before the advisory council? Finally, training sessions like this one, these do not constitute public meetings. So these are the sorts of things where this is not subject to public meetings law because again, we're just working on training folks and telling them what the rules are. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, so that's kind of the first chunk. The first chunk is public meetings law. And again, remember that those are any meetings where you're deliberating or there's a quorum of members present. The second component of the presentation is order and public records law. And a public record is any writing that contains information relating to the conduct of the public's business, including but not limited to court records, mortgages, deed records, prepared, owned, or used, or retained by a public body, regardless of physical form or characteristics. Again, this is a very broad definition meant to capture as many different things as possible. That means notes on your computer. That means handwritten notes. Those mean emails that you exchange. Those mean if you have a county cell phone and you're sending text messages. Those mean if you're leaving a voicemail. Actually, voicemails are an exception, but you can ignore that. But again, this is very, very broad. It includes emails, even those that are deleted, text messages, chats, audio recording, handwritten notes, calendar entries, to-do or task lists, audio or video recordings, photos, and drawings. So again, it's very, very broadly construed. So we can go to the next slide, because now we have an idea of what a public record is, what happens to those records. So anything that is in the possession of the county is a public record, and it's typically subject to disclosure. So anything produced or used by a county employee or official in the course of their duties is a public record unless exempt. This presentation is a little bit easier to give to county employees because we can just assume that everything we do on a county device is a public record. I'm speaking to you from my county computer. I have my county cell phone, which is different than my personal cell phone. Everything on the county cell phone I treat as a public record, and I assume is going to be potentially brought up, is subject to a public records request. Everything on my personal cell phone is not. That's something that I get to hold on to. In your capacity as advisory members, it's a little bit fuzzier. I'm not sure if you actually have county email addresses assigned to you, but even if you're using personal email accounts, if you're using those accounts to discuss or email things relating to the GRAC, that's something that will likely constitute a public record. Now, if you're CCing Aaron and other staff from solid waste, those are things that they're going to be kept in our records, and we'll have records on our servers of that. But as a member of a public body, which you are for the purposes of GRAC, that's something you need to retain and keep track of because it is potentially subject to a public records request. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So again, public records, that's sort of the second big chunk of things. And the important thing to remember with the public records law is, again, just assume that if it's a communication relating to your work as an advisory council for the government, it's going to be subject to discovery. And again, this sort of goes back to that Northern Light of Oregon policy, which is that we want public meetings to be open and we want public records about what happens at those meetings and about the business of government, because we want people to be able to see what their government is doing, to see why it's making the decisions it's making, and to be held accountable for it. And without public records law, without public meetings law, that becomes much more difficult. And these are things that are really, really important in order to make sure and ensure that we're providing good governance and serving the community effectively. To that end, kind of the third part of this presentation is with respect to Oregon ethics law. And Oregon ethics law applies to public officials, which you all are for the purposes of this training and this advisory council. What I will do, and again, this is where it is important to remember that I am not your lawyer. I'm a lawyer for the county. If you have any questions about whether or not something in the Oregon ethics law applies to you, we want to direct you to what's called OGEC. It's the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. And there is a link in this presentation. I'm not sure if it'll be sent out or not, but there's a link that will be provided where you can go to look at that and ask if you have any specific questions about Oregon ethics law and how it affects your work and the work that you're doing as part of the GRAC. And again, so a public official is an elected official, appointed official, employee or agent, irrespective of whether or not the person is compensated for the services. So as a pro bono volunteer member of the GRAC, you constitute a public official. I constitute a public official. Aaron is a public official. So it's a pretty broad category. When we're talking about your role in the GRAC, it is limited to your role on the GRAC. So keep that in mind when you're looking at it and asking any questions. We're thinking about Oregon ethics law is, does it apply to my role on the GRAC? And if the answer is no, then you're probably not going to be implicated. But again, if you have any specific questions, reach out to OGEC and consult with, potentially a lawyer for you so they can provide you with a more specific answer. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and go to the next portion of the presentation. So one of the things is who the ethics laws apply to and how it's drawn. And again, the objective of the ethics laws are to make sure that we have transparent government and so that we're not engaging in self-dealing. And self-dealing is fairly broadly drawn. That means that a public official cannot use their official position to benefit themselves, a relative, a household member, or a business with which they are associated. So what's that mean? What is a relative? Includes a spouse, children and stepchildren, children of the spouse, siblings, siblings of the spouse, spouse of the siblings, spouse of the siblings of the spouse, parents, parents of the spouse, and a person for whom the public official has a legal support obligation, a person who receives from or provides benefits to the public official. So again, way to think about it, it's your in-laws and your immediate family. It doesn't necessarily apply to something like a niece or a nephew, aunt or an uncle. They're not part of it. But again, it is sort of your immediate family and then your in-laws. That's who it constitutes, and that means that you cannot use your position to benefit those individuals. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. What is a business? Business, and again, I know these are things that people hate when we're talking about lawyers, but we got to define these terms so it's clear about what does and does not apply. So a business is a self-employed individual and any legal entity that has been formed for the purpose of producing economic gain. It is not a nonprofit. If the business is not a nonprofit formed under 501c, if the business official is only a member of the board of directors, or in another unpaid position. So if you're a volunteer, if you're working for a nonprofit, that doesn't count for the purposes of analyzing what constitutes a business for Oregon ethics law. Okay, good to go to the next one. You are associated with a business if you are a director, officer, owner, employee, or agent of a private business or a closely held corporation. That means that you currently hold or held during the preceding calendar year stock options, or an equity interest worth $1,000 or more in a private business or a closely held corporation. That's something where that's an entity that is not traded on a stock market, or it's owned by a family business and it's not publicly traded. So again, those are going to be smaller businesses where there's a more direct interest or direct financial interest. Those apply to publicly held corporations if the person holds $100,000 or more in a financial interest, or if that person is an officer or director of a publicly held corporation. So again, that's if you've got like a CEO, CTO, CFO, something where O is sort of the last letter in the acronym of your title, that's probably going to constitute it, or you're a director level or higher. You can go ahead and go to the next page. So what does this mean? We've talked about the fact that there is what constitutes a public official, what constitutes their family, what constitutes a business. The ethics law is implicated if there is a conflict of interest. And a conflict of interest is defined as when an official action would or could result in a financial benefit or a detriment to the public official or a relative or business with which they are associated. And there are two different categories. There is one where a person absolutely cannot participate in any deliberation, and there's one where a person might be able to participate in deliberation. If it is guaranteed that a person would have a financial stake in a decision made in their capacity as a public official, that is either they would gain money or lose money. That is, if they would gain a contract for their business or lose a contract for their business, or their partner's business would gain that contract, then that is an actual conflict of interest, and you must not participate in that deliberation. If that comes up, and if you have something where you believe you have a public interest or a conflict of interest, you would need to step out of the room for all of it, for the deliberation, for the vote, for the evidence. You would not be able to be a part of that deliberation. Now, there's a second set, and that's where things are a little bit fuzzier. If there is a possible Like if it's the sort of thing where if you're creating a program and that program might set up some contracts for your spouse's business, there's the possibility of a conflict of interest. And at that point, what you need to do is you need to disclose the conflict of interest at a public meeting and talk about the nature of it. Say, if it's about like, hey, Washington County GRAC, we want to award some contracts for, oh gosh, let's think of an absurd example for like, let's say like a dog painting business. You're gonna dye your dog different colors, and you know that your spouse owns a pet salon, and if it was something where GRAC for whatever reason was going to be voting on whether or not they were going to set up contracts for dyeing your pet, you would want to disclose, hey, before we deliberate on this, my partner owns a pet salon, and this might be something that they want to contract for. It's a possible conflict, but by disclosing it in public at the meeting, you are avoiding the potential conflict of interest. And you can then participate in that deliberation after you have disclosed. You must disclose first, and then you can deliberate. Okay, we go to the next slide. Next slide. So what is not prohibited? You can still receive your official compensation from your business or from if the position with the public entity has compensation, reimbursement of expenses. That is, if there was going to be a GRAC retreat and people were going to say, hey, we're going to rent out a facility and pay everyone's mileage to go to that facility and have a retreat. That's potentially reimbursable. Honoraria that is being paid to be a speaker somewhere, or awards for professional achievement. Again, these are things that generally speaking usually just apply to county employees or individuals in your own capacity. It is a little bit different. It's a little bit different when we talk about the things that are prohibited in kind of that context. So we can go to the next slide. So what is prohibited? Well, there are certain things that you cannot receive as a gift as a public official. If the source of that gift has a legislative or administrative interest in the decisions or votes of the official, that official can only accept gifts that do not exceed $50. So it's a sort of thing where if a gift is something with economic value, with or without valuable consideration or equivalent value, or with valuable consideration but less than that required of the public. So basically, the first is it's a gift card for $50. The second is I'll give you $50 off your next car wash. And then so again, that sort of sets the boundary for when you cannot accept a gift if it's over $50 in value. And again, that's construed broadly. But sort of the most important thing here is that there is a legislative or economic interest. Is an economic interest distinct from that of the general public? This doesn't mean that your spouse can't give you a gift. This doesn't mean that your friend can't give you a gift. This doesn't mean that someone walking down the street can't give you $100 out of the goodness of their heart. This means that someone with a vested interest in front of the public body of which you are a part gives you something. So again, if there is a party in front of GRAC that has a vested interest in something or a recommendation that GRAC is making, you cannot receive gifts from that individual or organization. But if it's someone that doesn't have anything in front of GRAC and is not connected to GRAC and it's not connected to solid waste, then you should be okay. But again, if you do have any questions and you have any concerns and you wonder if something might potentially implicate Oregon's ethics law, again, we would refer you to the OGEC website and they can answer those questions with a little more specificity. But again, it really is focused on making sure that people in front of government bodies can't bribe or use gifts to influence those government bodies to make favorable decisions. Go to the next one. And again, this one is probably a little bit less relevant to members of voluntary advisory board, but you can't use your public position to create the opportunity for additional personal income. Again, kind of going back to the dyeing your pet example, which I know is absurd, but it's the sort of thing where if you are the only person in Washington County that dyes pets, and you decide that GRAC is going to create a pet dyeing program, that's something where you're probably going to be creating the additional personal income, and that's probably going to be a conflict of interest. You may not use a government agency's supplies, facilities, equipment, employees, records, or any other public resources to engage their private employment or business interests. That means you can't print flyers for your pet dying business using county resources. Officials are not to engage in private business interests or other employment activities on their government agency's time. And that means that in GRAC, again, this is more relevant to government employees, but if I had a dying a pet business, I couldn't use my time. I couldn't use the time that I was working from 8 until 5 to go out and put up those flyers that I just printed up using the county printer. Finally, confidential information gained as official is not to be used to obtain a financial benefit for the public official, a relative, or a member of the official's household, or a business with which they're associated. An example of this is that if you were someone on a transit planning board and you knew where they were going to build a road, and you told your spouse to go up and buy property along that place so you could sell it back to the county at a huge bump up and a huge markup, that would be a conflict of interest and is not permitted under Oregon ethics law. Okay, go to the next slide. So you can't essentially feather a nest for yourself after public employment. You can't use your position to create a new employment opportunity and then take that job as soon as you quit working for the county. You cannot use confidential information for personal gain, sort of like we were talking about in terms of the knowing where the road's going to go. And after you stop serving a public body, there may not be a direct beneficial financial interest in a public contract for 2 years after the date the contract was authorized by the person acting in their capacity as a public official. That is, if you authorized a contract for dying a pet, you can't go out and create a dying a pet business and take it to and fill that contract 2 weeks later. But if you wait for 2 years, then you could. So again, there's got to be an air gap between work as a county public official, as a public official, and securing personal financial benefit. And that's it. I kind of went through it. I was a little bit faster than I normally do it, but again, with GRAC, I think really the important things to remember is, again, be cognizant of your ethics obligations. And if you have questions about that, contact OGEC. But again, the really two big things to remember about public meetings and public records. The meetings that you have in the deliberations should be public, and any records that you keep for those meetings should also be public, because again, we want to make sure that government is being transparent and open when it's doing the business of governing and advising the government. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eamon. Any questions?
Yeah, Vinon.
I just have one because it kind of comes up in other committees that I'm on, is that obviously I'm an industry representative. And so like the example is when we're talking about RMA or something, people are like, well, it's not a conflict of interest, but we're involved in it, so we want it to work and things like that. But as a public representative or a member at large, where do you see that line? Like if I work for either another government agency or another company, should you declare that and say we're talking about something that might affect Beaverton? I work for the city of Beaverton. What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So again, got to give the qualification. This is not legal advice. You got to check with the lawyer first. But yeah, I know, and everyone rolls their eyes. I have to say that every time when I'm telling my girlfriend something.
Sure.
Like it's just like okay, I know it, but I still got to say it. So yeah, no, I mean, I think that if the important thing to remember, like taking your example of Beaverton, that wouldn't be a conflict of interest, because if you're a representative of the city of Beaverton on this public interest, the question is, do you have a vested financial stake? And it's like, well,
yep.
No. Like if I'm an employee of Beaverton, I don't if I'm an employee of Washington County and there's a Washington County contract and that gets approved, that doesn't affect my pay, or I don't have a vested financial interest in that. There's no economic interest for me.
Or if it's city of Clackamas or something like that, does it? So if you're influencing because you want to make something somewhere else, I don't have an example, but is that something because you're benefiting your employer by arguing for something? Is that
Yeah, that's I think that's.
But I'm not getting financial. Yeah.
No, yeah. Again, you're not benefiting from it financially. Again, the best answer is always disclose, because you'd rather over disclose than under disclose. If you say, hey, just a heads up, this is a contract where this is a program where they're considering between Washington County and Beaverton, and I actually work for the city of Beaverton, that might be something where you just want to flag that, and that could potentially fall under the could pose a conflict where you can participate after disclosure, and that's the sort of thing where despite what most people say about lawyers, we actually try and strive to be really, really ethical in what we do. And so my my thing is, if I'm worried about anything ethical, I always err on the side of being too ethical. Like no one's ever gonna get mad at you for being too ethical. That's the sort of thing where, and you can say, well, I told everyone about this, and now I was able to go ahead and continue participating, so it's not going to be big of an issue. Now, as a private individual, that's a little bit different, or as an employee of a company. Now that gets a little bit fuzzier, because it's like, let's say you're an employee of a company that does profit share. And so at that point, then if you are saying, hey, let's approve the contract to my company, knowing that additional $200,000 that comes into your company, you're going to see a chunk of that. That's something where you probably would have potentially a vested financial interest in it. But again, it kind of goes back to those rules about what the size of the company is, what your financial interest in it is. So I think there's not a bright line, and that's why I think there's the could influence it, and it's always better. It's always best to, again, just like err on the side of saying, hey, I think this might be a conflict. I just want to make sure people are aware of it, and if you do that, you'll probably be okay.
Thanks. And I think that's what most of us always do. But since you were here, I figured, hey, I'll throw it out there and see what you're repeating.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, we'll go on to the next item agenda, which is the annual rate review process overview.
Thank you, Eamon.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your time. Good night.
Well, thank you, Eamon.
All right, everyone, give me just a second to share my screen once again. All right, can you all see that? This is the annual rate review process overview. I'm Erin Stein. I am the operations supervisor here at Washington County. I know that we have several new members, and so just for the benefit of everyone, I'm going to start at the top with rates and then work down into the more granular details this evening. First up, I'm going to talk a little bit about external entities that influence rates here at Washington County. We are under Metro Regional Governments Authority, and so we have adopted the Metro 2030 Regional Waste Plan, and they have a whole section. Goal 14 relates to rate setting. 14.1, this action is really important. This is just making sure that rates that we're implementing throughout the region are transparent and also consistent. Actually, most of us in the region, we operate in a franchise environment, and we all employ very similar annual rate review processes. And 14.3, this particular goal is the one that encourages us to establish like rates for consistent service offerings. So if you think about our service offerings just a couple of years ago, we switched from having this very kind of open to interpretation rate for managing bulky waste, which was an actual cost of disposal plus an hourly rate, and everyone was applying it a little bit differently. This committee supported staff in developing a bulky waste menu. So now it's very clear, regardless of what you have to get rid of, items of a certain size or type, we've defined the pricing for that. And that does lead to regional consistency, because several other local jurisdictions have already adopted those types of menus, and more of us are working in that direction. And then Action 14.4, this is implementation of a low income rate. We were actually the first in the state to do this. We undertook a process back in 2021. We implemented in 2022. We're now in year 4. And so this is just some of the ways that our regional connections influence some of the rate processes that we follow here at Washington County. So the role that we play in setting rates. It's really important that we have local government oversight. Our obligation is to really center the system users' needs and experiences, and that's all system users. We need to adapt our service offerings to meet a variety of needs, and we also need to make sure that we can back that up by creating educational content and technical assistance, which supports us maintaining a really robust and healthy collection system. It's our responsibility as local government to ensure that garbage and recycling collection companies that are providing the services on our behalf are doing that in a consistent manner. We achieve that through regular hauler collaboration. We have formalities such as our solid waste and recycling administrative rules, our Washington County Code, and even our code enforcement arm that supports that compliance. I think it's really important to keep in mind that we do keep regionally consistent rate review best practices. Maintaining a franchise system is very unique, particularly when we have 8 operators in that system. And our system's valued at over $45 million. So it's really important that we do our due diligence in unincorporated Washington County. And so Washington County, they employ myself as the operations supervisor to manage this work. And then we also hire a contractor, and that is Marina and Company, who's our certified CPAs. And I think it's also just important to note that we do consistent collaborations with our other local governments, rate topics and things that impact rates and fees, such as disposal costs rising, fuel's a hot topic right now. We're meeting on a monthly basis just to connect to see what's emerging or what our trends are. And we also just want to make sure that we're doing things, again, consistently across the region when we're talking about rate setting. And I think a good example of that is I shared out detailed cost reports with you all that go to the haulers each spring. That's a fairly standard template. We all want to drill down to a similar level of financial detail, just so we can make sure that a company who's operating across jurisdictions, when they're allocating costs to unincorporated, especially those indirect costs, that they're doing so consistently, and that's easier to spot if we're all using a similar template. And then, as I indicated, those regional check-ins, lots of things impact rates. We could do a new programmatic offering. Those things don't come at no cost. So when we implemented a reduced rate program, some individuals in the system pay a little bit more, and they support those that need that assistance. For food scraps collection, to add that to the waste stream, that there's potential for more trucks operating. And so there's just an added cost to the system when you implement a new program. We look at the economic changing conditions, so processing charges. We have to look at our system's very unique because we have Metro, who's our public partner, and then we have a lot of private entities operating in the system. And so we just need to track general costs of service. And then we also have our legislative impacts. So the Recycling Modernization Act passed and was implemented as of July 1st, 2025. And that actually has sent an influx of cash into the system for a variety of different reasons. Our haulers are eligible to receive reimbursement for collecting glass of $77 a ton. So that has an impact to the ratepayer. They're seeing some cost savings there. Our MRFs are receiving funding, and that means when our haulers are taking those materials for processing, we're seeing reduced cost or no cost, where we've seen millions of dollars in cost to our system over the past few years with recycling markets being so variable. So now I'm going to drill into the county specifically. Why do we get to set rates for unincorporated Washington County? Because we have county code that says we get to do so. And that specific code is section 804.330. There's multiple other sections in the code that are worth mentioning: 804.320, 0.330, 340, all outline rate setting provisions, but this 330 is what actually gives the board direction to set the rates. And basically it says the board has discretion to increase or decrease rates, and that cannot happen without an assessment. And that assessment is to look at the cost of doing business and determine, with the cost of doing business, oh, sorry, I lost my place in my notes. So the board may increase or decrease based upon an increase and decrease of the actual cost of doing business or an increased cost of additional, better, or more comprehensive service. So when we're talking about who plays a part in the rate setting process, well, really everybody. We hear from our community members who want to know about why it costs so much for their garbage service, or they'd like to see a new service offering and want to know why that's not available to them. We have Washington County staff. As I mentioned, I have myself, but there's also a number of other individuals, including Rusty, who support this annual process that we go through. And then we have the actual service providers, our garbage and recycling collection companies. Since our franchise system does provide exclusive rights to serve geographical areas, it supports the economics of the rate setting in a number of ways. Because you have a geographical area, we have a reduction in the number of trucks over the roadway. This franchise system makes sure that whether you live in Timber or Aloha, you have like access to service, and that the rates are fair and equitable, and that we can get our services to every part of the county. So there's no exclusion. If you live on a dead end road that's 5 miles long, you still get your service just the same as if you were in a townhouse community. And because the system displaces competition within the market, that makes the county's role of rate setting and fee setting associated with the cost of collection even more important, right? We have 8 operating entities, and we really want to make sure that they are operating in fiscally responsible ways. Here is our annual timeline for rate setting. I am neck deep in reviewing all the financials right now, and we're out doing site visits as well. This only shows 6 months. We really work on rates all year round, but the haulers, this is the haulers timeline. So in January, they receive the detailed cost reports, they submit those to the county, and then through that, we move through this process. We're doing some site visits. Late April, so just in a few weeks, we'll have our composite results. We'll be able to see the health of the system. We look at the different sectors, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. In early May, we share our results with the Washington County Haulers Association, and then we actually have one hauler who's not a member of that association. We'll have a sidebar meeting with that hauler. We come back to you all in May. It'll be the 3rd week of May to get so you can see our findings and hear our recommendation that we want to move forward to the board. We go back to the board in June. And lastly, with the board approval to any changes, July 1st, we mail out any rate change letters, whether rates are going up or down, to all customers. And then August 1st is typically our implementation date. Okay. So rates. So we have our base rates, and back in 2009 is when our base rates were established. Those were established using things like can cart weight studies, tonnage analysis, looking at the operational differences between servicing a rural customer versus an urban customer. So you'll see on all of our rates, we have two sets of rates, urban versus rural. From there, we take our detailed cost report information. We require these annually, not only from all 8 haulers, but any subcontractors that they have. So medical waste is a subcontractor. There's 2. And then there's also a drop box subcontractor, Washington County Drop Box, who provides services to several haulers. Once we have all of that financial information, staff and Marina, we review, analyze, and aggregate all of the haulers' data, and then we work through reconciling it, and we get out there and conduct our site visits. As this is a cost-based system, the actual return on revenue does vary between the lines of service, and I'll talk a little bit more about those lines of service in a few slides. In essence, the goal of the annual rate review process is to reset the system in the coming rate cycle to a fixed return on revenue. And the agreed upon return on revenue for the board's policy has been 10%. Okay, so what type of data do we look at in our DCRs? So our annual rate review ensures that the costs are appropriately directed to unincorporated ratepayers specifically. This year, I'm going to be looking very closely at recycling processing cost with the new cash flowing in from RMA. I will also be looking at, we were conducted last year by the board to do an urban versus rural assessment to determine if there were inequities in the rates and revenues received and to service a urban customer versus a rural customer. We'll be reporting out on those 2 key areas for you all when I come back in May. If adjustments are necessary based on the findings of our DCRs, we will present adjustments to come back to you all and then the Board of County Commissioners, and we do that for each line of service. When we're looking at hauler data, I sent you the detailed cost reports. There's a lot of data we capture, but just high level overview, we look at wages, labor, finances, equipment. We calculate truck hours. We look at customer counts. We look at operational expenses, and then we do that by line of service. And some costs are really easy to quantify. Our direct cost of operating, we call those out, and then we also the lion's share of the cost are more of those indirect costs or shared costs. So if you think about office space or operational overhead, equipment that's maybe used across multiple lines of service or even in multiple jurisdictions, because most of our routes, a lot of our routes within unincorporated Washington County cross over city lines. So we employ a return on revenue methodology. And this is really our standard approach to make sure that we're applying the appropriate margins in regards to collecting solid waste. The reason we use return on revenue and not return on investment is that these types of operations don't require significant capital expenditures or investments to operate. So ROR is the standard. The review process includes our entire aggregate of certificate haulers. Each year, we look at the total revenues collected for the system. Then we subtract allowable expenses, and that determines the profit or operating margin. Then we take that profit and we divide that by the revenue to get the return on revenue. If the prior year's system return on revenue is more or less than the target ROR, then the financial performance of each line, the residential, the commercial, and the drop box, is further evaluated to determine the value of the over and under performance, and then we'll recommend an adjustment to get that reset to 10. A couple things to consider. This is mainly what we uplift to the board. When considering adjustments to rates, we look at investments being made in facilities or equipment or the system in general. You want to look at the services of management. So this might be where we want to offer a new service. We would assess the cost for that. Local wage scales. It's really important for us in the metro region to make sure our garbage and recycling collection companies provide a livable wage. That also applies to our MRFs and those that are processing our materials. It's really important for them to have livable wages and benefits. We want to look at the concentration of customers in our service area. Unincorporated Washington County keeps growing. Every year I look at the numbers and we're serving more and more community members. We want to look at our methods of collection and transportation. So we might be looking at a front loader versus a side loader, electric truck versus a CNG truck, the length of haul to the closest disposal facility, and then our costs for disposal or processing. We want to have them assess what a reasonable return on revenue is for the haulers, and then also talk about system impacts, foreseen or not foreseen. So collection rate, they provide revenue for Washington County. The haulers submit quarterly reports in the form of a gross receipt statement. These payments actually support the solid waste and recycling's budget. Last year, we did a code change, so the haulers actually submit a 4% fee to the county each quarter. The gross receipt equals the total amount of revenue received and not the total number of invoices produced. This does vary greatly among the haulers depending on their billing cycle or collection frequency. Last year, let me look at this. So in total in 24-25, $1.4 million in hauler fees were collected by Washington County. These fees are actually held in a special fund and support our code enforcement, our regulatory, our education and outreach work. And then per code, if there's any overages, the offset goes to the county general fund. So where can you find information on rates? So a key action for the Metro 2030 Regional Waste Plan was making sure that everybody could find our rates and they could take a rate sheet and tee that up to their bill and easily read that. And so through our certificate review process and through making a lot of additions to our website in the last few years, we've found a lot of benefit for the customers. So depending on whether you're a commercial customer or a residential customer, maybe you want to participate in Recycle Plus or the reduced rate program. We have spent a lot of time and energy updating this website, and we don't just create a website, we transcreate all of our content in English and Spanish It is a lengthy process, but it provides a cleaner user experience. And then in addition to us maintaining both an English and Spanish website for all of our services, you can use Google Translate or reach out to us and we can get you information in our 13 safe harbor languages. I would say in general, ratepayers are encouraged to call their garbage and recycling collection companies to discuss rates as a first line of offense, just because they can see what your current service level is. We don't have transparency into that. They can see what type of service offerings are available, be that, if you want to look at a drop box, they might provide that service directly, or they may need to direct you to a subcontractor. And just as a reminder, if individuals are having difficulty paying their bills, not only is it in our administrative rules that the haulers have to direct people to the reduced rate program, we contract with Community Action to administer that program, and they bring in a large volume of applicants every year for enrollment. Okay, so service sectors, we have residential rates, but it's actually can cart service. Can cart service can include commercial customers as well. Our service bundle, if you are in an urban area, is weekly garbage, every other week recycling, and food scraps, yard debris collection. If you're in the rural area, you get the weekly garbage and every other week recycling. We do offer will call service. Not all jurisdictions do, but some individuals don't generate a large volume of materials, or maybe they snowbird and they're gone part of the year. You have an option to set up like an a la carte service. We don't, we allow our service providers to decide if they're going to bill monthly or bi-monthly. I think all 8 of our service providers bill for services every other month. And when we're looking at the residential service rates, this includes the reduced rate program and then Recycle Plus collection. And here's an example cart. This is based off 2024 data. You saw a slight shift in 2025. I haven't updated that yet. Yeah, I haven't updated that yet, but it's not much variance. I think there was like one flip-flop in the percentage where vehicle costs went down and administrative costs went up. So I'll hopefully have some updated numbers when I come back next month. Overall, for an urban customer in unincorporated Washington County, if you have a 32-gallon can cart, which is this representation here, your rate is $30.61 a month plus the $2 recycling surcharge. For this year's rate review, because we are seeing a positive impact from RMA, I am doing analysis to see if we can do away with the recycling surcharge and roll that into the rate so we don't have that add-on fee. I think that'll serve a couple of purposes. First, it just makes for a cleaner bill if I'm a customer and I'm trying to see what my service actually cost. One line on a bill is much easier than remembering to add 2 together. And 2, I'm seeing that in 2024, our disposal fees were $1.48 million and our system processing costs were $1.3 million. And I think that's where we're seeing the reduction is in those processing costs. So I'm feeling like if that can offset well enough, I'll come back with a recommendation that to either do away with the $2 recycling charge or we'll roll it in and just do a flat rate. We have our commercial service sector. And for this, It's structured different than our residential just because we need more flexibility. It's based on your base container, so it's still a bundled service. Garbage is the base, and then you have the ability to collect or your recycling up to twice the volume is included. You can either be billed monthly or bi-monthly. Most of the haulers on the commercial side are sending you a monthly invoice, not a bi-monthly invoice. And we do offer commercial food scrap collection. That is only available to urban customers, not to rural customers. We have medical collection rates. We actually haven't had an adjustment to medical waste for a number of years. This year, we actually are seeing low returns. One of the things that's impacted that, I don't know if you all remember, Covanta was operating in Marion County, and a good volume of medical waste was flowing there for processing. And Covanta actually shuttered, I believe it was January of 2025. That means we have no local options for medical waste. They're getting hauled as far away as Texas and Florida. Utah is the primary, as is Washington State. So that has added a lot of system processing costs. So my assumption is once I see the final numbers, I will be coming in and recommending for an adjustment to medical waste rates this year. And that includes Sharps collection as well. We still have 2 subcontractors operating in this space, Trilogy, and then WM recently purchased Stericycle. So you have 2 medical waste subcontractors. Then we have our Dropbox services. Dropbox is anything from a 1-yard occasional container that you might have. You might have a compactor if you're a business or a multifamily property with limited space. You might utilize a compactor service. Dropbox can be ongoing at a business, or if you just need to order a 20-yard one because you're cleaning out your garage, always an option in Washington County. This is probably the most complicated billing structure because there's daily rental and drop-off fees and a number of things to set up and receive this service. But in general, there's a lot of variability because if you think about who most likely is going to use Dropboxes, it's a lot of construction related work. And as I'm seeing, because we also regulate Hillsborough landfill, which, as you know, is primarily a C&D landfill. We're seeing a reduction in their gross receipt statement, so their tonnage is down. And so by cause and effect, you also, I'm seeing similar things out of the Dropbox sector as well. Things seem to be slowing down a bit economically, and that could impact their ability to be profitable in this sector. And then for Dropbox subcontractors, almost all the service providers in Washington County provide their own, but we have Washington County Dropbox, and they service Evergreen Disposal and Walker Garbage. And with that, that is my general rate overview. I'm happy to dig into any general questions, and then I know I did send out the detailed cost reports as well. So if you had any questions about those, I'm happy to discuss that too.
Do I assign who goes first?
I think, sorry, I was looking at my other screen, so I did not see who raised their hand first.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just had one quick question. So on the food scrap collection, that's for urban businesses only. And is that because they're the distances to haul for rural businesses like, restaurants or whatever is too far or too expensive, or why that division? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was set up before I started. I would be curious to see how many food service businesses we actually have in the rural areas. My assumption it's low. Um, so yeah, I can't actually answer the question of why the exclusion when we established it. But similarly, I do know because I was here when we set up our residential. Um, it's very cost prohibitive if we wanted to include all of the rural areas in yard debris collection. It was just that it was never set up that way. So to add food scraps for rural, we would also have to add the yard debris. And that would have a major rate impact, right? Because now we actually have double the trucks running over the road every other week to service those. But yeah, I can't speak to the commercial side, more to the rural side, how we just stuck to the urban areas because that bundle already included the yard debris service.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Brian, did you want to go ahead?
The vice chair should have honors.
Okay. Um, Aaron, when you go to put out the May agenda, will you have the link to the PowerPoint showing what the rate review is? We have the PowerPoint ahead of time so we know what kind of increase or would be.
Absolutely. And there'll be a staff report as well. So you'll want to look out for that the Thursday before we'll post.
That way we'll get an idea of what to discuss at that time.
Absolutely. And like I said, I plan to do a highlight on the Recycling Modernization Act just in regards to recycling, and then also just that board deliverable on the urban versus rural assessment. I'll need to pull up some findings for that as well. So my talk might be a little bit longer than usual, or not. We'll see.
That's fine. It's an important topic, and we would like as much information as possible. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you very much. Aaron is always awesome, but I got a few questions.
Yeah.
First thing, do most trucks use diesel fuel? Because I heard you mention the diesel price. We all know prices are crazy. Do you have any breakdown, just roughly what the fleet is?
Most of the fleet is actually natural gas. I would have to see, it does vary who's using diesel versus natural gas. So fuels isn't just diesel fuel in that sense. I mean, I think we've heard that CNG is also rising due to the conflict that's occurring. So, yes, so it's fuel in general. And then we do have some new electric fleets,
Perfect.
vehicles as well.
Thank you. The RMA, I'm just going to say it in plain language, feels like we're some money's flooding into the system that could help possibly the end users with their bills, because if it helps the haulers reduce their expense, thus the rates would go down. Is that kind of a fair, natural river stream to assume, or not?
Yeah, I think that's the goal, right? Is that the producers are managing some of those costs up front, and that our ratepayers don't see that. Now, it's going to take a while. Full transparency, the implementation date was July 1st. Many of us, including the county, have struggled, struggled to work through the contracting process so that money can flow. It was complicated. I'm going to speak from the county perspective. The county is receiving money to do contamination reduction programming, and that's a great new opportunity that we have to get funding from Circular Action Alliance. Some of that money is also flowing to our haulers. So we had to not only set up our own contract with Circular Action Alliance, we had to make sure all 8 haulers did that. And then we had to set up IGAs with the 8 cities that we're doing work with. So if you can imagine, we had to do 17 contracts times 2 because we had to do a state form, and then we had to do our contracting. So to be fair, The money's available and they can retroactively seek reimbursement for some of those contamination reduction activities. I'm not seeing that in the 2025 DCRs because they don't have the money in hand. That's something that I'll have to account for in 2026. Influences that we already are seeing is those that did get their contracting in place pretty quickly, that $77 a ton reimbursement for glass collection, that's already happening. And we do have haulers that received some funding and some are still waiting for that reimbursement. Where we're seeing the most benefit is at the processing facilities where Vinod could speak to the technicality of how the fees work more than I can. But yes, we are seeing a big reduction in the actual processing cost when our haulers are taking it in for collection, which is amazing because processing, as I said, makes up about half of the collection cost for providing.
So, just a follow up on that, is this funding indefinite or is it a set period for like 6 years and it'll be cut off?
Oh, it's in state statute.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just because I worry that you get a pile of money for a while and it disappears and then you get a bump and that kind of stuff. Last question, and I apologize for manipulating. The DCRs. When you do the breakdown, do you ever look at the impact of governmental programs, rules, and regs as a driver of overhead for the haulers? For an example, right? If the government said every hauler had to have flashing lights that were multicolored and played music on every thing, then the haulers would have to install it, and that becomes a cost, which becomes an expense, which then affects the rates. You see where I'm going with this? So, is there anything that we do in this analysis to say the government is pushing this much overhead cost on our haulers? So, if we looked at some of these programs, maybe some of them are legacy. Like one of the things that caught me here was the nature of the website, right? Modern day, the way you do it, you just have a toggle and you let the site auto change versus separately maintaining English and Spanish. And that could be a possible cost savings, things like that. And I assume if we mandate the haulers to do that, if we change that a little bit, reduce the overhead, you see where I'm going, right? Trying to save money to reduce expenses, thus save possible increases for all of us.
Sure. Our overhead is the programs that we require them to provide. So they have to provide garbage and recycling collection service. The recycling has to be provided. That's a state mandate. So we actually have an exception. We're supposed to provide weekly recycling service, but we got an exception from the state saying it saves us time and money by running trucks every other week over the road. And so Washington County Unincorporated has an exception to do that. Recycle Plus, that's an optional program that has cost associated with it. There's overhead. Reduce program, that was a policy decision on, do we want to support community members that need that support, that are vulnerable? Well, to do that, then there is a system cost that has to be shared by the rest of us. Do we have, we don't really get into operational mandates though, in that regard. Like, obviously we heard your concerns over color coding bins. Well, I'm doing an assessment right now to see, well, what's the average attrition rate? Because was 2020 really unreasonable? If I can find out that on average, our haulers are replacing 5 to 10% of their containers every year. No, that's actually probably wasn't an unreasonable request, but we don't want to add costs to the system, right? So I'm going back, doing my due diligence, and hopefully in a next rulemaking can come forward with some conclusive evidence. But in general, we give them operational autonomy as long as they're providing our core services as outlined in the administrative rules.
Okay, thank you.
And we handle the education and outreach for the most part through a cooperative countywide. So those costs are the costs that you see when we're talking, where Rusty's referring to our budget, and those costs are paid by the gross receipt fees. And then we also have Circular Action Alliance. That's new funding for us this fiscal year. And then we receive a Metro grant as our waste shed authority, and that covers some of our operating cost as well.
Thank you, Brian. Erin, you mentioned the Recycle Plus in the system cost. Recycle Plus should not be a factor in anything, right? That's supposed to be its own self-funded program.
Well, it's not self-funded. What happens is I back the cost out because it doesn't self-fund. It incurs more cost than the revenue it brings in. So when we look at that program, what happens is when we do the adjustments for residential, I back out those costs and revenues, and then we adjust without that being incorporated. But it's done on a residential collection route. Each hauler does it a little bit differently. Some of them are providing those on a split body truck that's collecting other recyclables. Others have a dedicated truck. And because there's so much variance in how that program is operating, it's really hard to allocate costs down to such a minute level. And that's what it really does come down to, is cost allocation. I haven't looked at last year's numbers for Recycle Plus, but the last 3 years, 3 years, it certainly has brought in less revenue than the actual cost to provide that service.
And that's a hit the haulers have to take. I mean, they wanted this program, they wanted to get rid of Ridwell, so there you go. I want to make sure that those costs do not.
But I do allocate that back out. Similar with medical waste, they've had a very high return on revenue, and so that didn't impact the commercial line of service. We back out the medical waste collection cost from the commercial line of service. And I will do that again this year, and then we will adjust that independently. And we can have a conversation about adjusting Recycle Plus rates as well. And I certainly could tell you what that might look like if we had to get to a full cost recovery model.
And the medical waste, that's just for people who pay for that. It has nothing to do with residential rates, right?
No, so medical waste is on the commercial line of service. So doctors' offices, hospitals, dental offices, anybody who needs sharps. Even fire departments and police office, or police agencies.
A facility that was processing that closed down. You really need to get more facilities like that.
Yeah, there's other options. So just medical waste is very complicated. Some of it has to go for incineration. Some of it, like the sharks, can go to autoclave. So we didn't lose our only outlet. We just lost a major outlet. And then now with what's left, you have to haul further. And unfortunately, when you're looking at markets and what's available, yeah, it's a big increase to the cost just because transportation is hauling to Texas, 1,800 times more in mileage to get to a place that's safe and sound and it's highly regulated. Yeah,
we gotta get
a good thing.
These here do recycling for us. But thank you, Erin, for a great presentation.
Well, I always offer this every year. I'm happy to do a one-on-one if you really need to just better wrap your head around the process that we follow as the county, questions around it. I mean, in general, my plug is we do our due diligence. It's that's my job to look at the numbers, come to this committee, and ultimately we need to take our findings to the board. The cost of doing business is going up everywhere. It does every year, but making sure that everybody's operating prudently, who's providing service in the system, is really important. And yeah, that's our role, to do this every year.
Oh, I was gonna ask if anyone else had any questions, but it looks like Brian's got another question.
Just one more. I was just curious. Have we seen an increase in the reduce rates program? I didn't know if I'm you may not have had time to look at it, but it's a great program. I really love it, and I'm hoping more people are aware of it and are using it, and we're starting to see, because when you look at it compared to others, this is a very robust program, and I think it's a good program. We need it, especially these days. I was just curious, are we seeing the adoption of that going up?
As far as our users go, it's interesting what we are seeing, and I was trying to pull up 2025s really quick, but I must not be on the VPN. I don't have it handy, but our users are pretty static. So the first year, I think we had 1,200 applicants and 800 approvals. Year two, we were around 800 applicants, 600 and almost 700 approvals. Last year, we saw a spike again to kind of our year one levels because everybody was in a renewal phase. And then I would say that we've dropped back down in this year two to be more like our second year level. We modeled that we would hit a peak of 2,000 participants on the system. Like once we hit that threshold, it would cost us about $600,000 a year to subsidize. I would say with those that come on and off the system, and we only do a point in time look. So just whatever date they submitted their DCR, that December 31st date, I'd say we're probably closer to that $300,000 or $400,000 system cost. It's interesting because a lot of individuals don't seek assistance. And I would say 70 to 80% of those that we have that are on the program found their way to community action for rent assistance or some other utility assistance. And then community action was able to say, hey, you live in unincorporated, you should really just go ahead and sign up for this program. So really, we're only seeing about 25% of our users coming directly from the hauler or finding the county website and being directed there. So I think just in general, we had some trepidation early on about broadly advertising, say on Facebook or other social media, because we were the only ones doing it. And if you advertise and then someone applies and then they're outside unincorporated, one, we're incurring an application fee. And then they're also facing that rejection because they're not eligible for the project. But now we have Hillsborough and Beaverton that both have similar programs, and the city of Cornelius is about to adopt. And many of us are using community action. So that's actually reducing our administrative cost, because if they were applying for us, but they actually live, say they thought they were in Aloha, but they might be city of Beaverton, well, then they're just getting shifted over to Beaverton. Beaverton's paying that application cost. So we're seeing some operational efficiencies, which is really exciting. But I would say overall, yeah, we are kind of leveling off in those that are participating, not really continuing to that 2,000 applicant peak where I thought we might be this year. But we do a report every year, and I haven't seen the final data from Marina, and I'll be sure to bring that back next month to the committee as well.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on Brian's question and ask if you knew the amount of people that actually renewed after their 2-year subsidized went out.
We had a really high renewal rate, and I don't know how many new renewals to new applicants that year. I didn't ask community action at the time, but it was a good flux of renewals. I would say at least 50% were already on the program and renewed.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. I think the next item on the agenda was public comment.
And I think we still don't have.
Still no
Nope, just us this evening.
public meeting. Okay.
All right. Well, with that, just a reminder that we're not meeting the second Thursday. We're meeting the third Thursday in May for rate review. And it is a different meeting link because I'm sorry things got sideways on the invites when I tried to change weeks. But all of this series has had the same Zoom code. That one has a unique code, but I'll have reminders going out to you all the week before.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we can go ahead and adjourn.
Yeah. Thank you for covering, Sandra. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good
Everybody.
night.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.